The night I offered Diana a place to wait out the ice storm, I expected her to say no. She had said no to every offer I'd made in the 18 months we'd shared a wall on Sunnyside Avenue. No to borrowing my parking spot in February. No to splitting the cost of the fence repair last spring. No to the extra bag of de-icing salt I'd left on her step with a post-it that said, "Take it. I bought too much." She'd left the salt there for 36 hours before it disappeared. I chose to read that as acceptance. She was not a woman who accepted things gracefully. So when she appeared at my door on a Tuesday night in February, phone at 4%, her wool coat still on, the ice storm doing what Ottawa ice storms do to every streetlight on the block, I said it without thinking. "You can wait it out at mine. I've got the gas fireplace." She looked at me, one beat longer than was comfortable. Then she said, "Okay. Not fine, or I suppose, or the more likely, only if you stop playing Brahms at 11 at night." Just okay before I'd even finished the sentence, and that one flat word from Diana Reeves, who had slid 14 notes under our shared door over the past year and a half, each one more precisely worded than the last, landed in my chest like a stone dropping into still water. I stepped aside, she walked in. We'd met the way most semi-detached neighbors in Ottawa meet, which is to say badly. I'd moved into the left side of the duplex in August, 2 years before, after the engineering firm I worked for relocated its office from Toronto. I knew nobody. I unpacked boxes, bought a used upright piano from a Kijiji listing, and made the mistake of playing it at 10 o'clock on a Wednesday. The note appeared under the door the following morning. Printed, not handwritten. "If you must play Chopin after dark, could you at least finish the etude? You stopped at the hardest part. Your neighbor, right side." I stared at it for a long time. Then I played the etude from the beginning and left the door cracked. The second note arrived the following week. "Pedal. You're rushing the pedal in the third movement. Right side." I didn't leave the door open that time, but I fixed the pedal. I met Diana in person on a Saturday in October at the mailbox. She was exactly what the notes had suggested, an immigration lawyer who argued cases at the federal court, carrying a tote bag that looked like it had been through a semester's worth of casework and come out the other side on sheer commitment. Dark hair pulled back the way people pull their hair back when they don't have time to think about it. A travel mug from Second Cup that looked like it had survived several winters and been asked to survive several more. "You fixed the pedal," she said. "You were specific." I'm a lawyer. I'm always specific. She pulled out her mail and went inside. That was how we started. Not friends. Not neighbors the way neighbors are when they wave from driveways and lend each other extension cords. We were something harder to name. She complained about my practice hours. I complained about her recycling bins left at the edge of the shared driveway 12 hours before collection. She said my porch light was too bright and aimed wrong. I said her delivery boxes formed a fire hazard on the shared stoop for a full day before she brought them in. We were precise with each other. It had the texture of annoyance but the rhythm of something else, and I didn't examine it too closely because the alternative felt like opening a door I hadn't decided about yet. What I did know was that I'd started timing my evening practice around the sound of her key in the lock next door. That I'd switched from pods to ground coffee because she'd mentioned, once in passing, that she could smell it through the wall in the mornings, and she hadn't said it like a complaint. That her notes were the most interesting things left in my mailbox, and that I had kept all 14 of them in the drawer beside the piano. The storm that Tuesday was the kind Ottawa produces every few years to remind you it means business. Freezing rain since 4 in the afternoon, then heavier, then ice thick enough on every surface to walk on if you were foolish. Hydro Ottawa's outage map crashed from the reports by 8. My street went dark at 9:15. I had the gas fireplace going and a headlamp from an old camping kit and was halfway through reheating leftover lentil soup when she knocked. Diana stood on the shared porch in her coat and her boots, and the expression she made when she was recalculating something. Her baseboards were electric. No power meant no heat, and with the temperature dropping to -20 by midnight, she wasn't going to be stubborn about it. She said all of this like a concession statement in court, factual, preemptive of argument. I said, "You can wait it out at mine. I've got the gas fireplace." She said okay and came inside. My half of the duplex was not impressive. Living room, small kitchen, a home office with a daybed I used when my brother visited from Vancouver. Bookshelves I'd built from pine boards, because the ones at IKEA always looked like they were waiting to give up. A piano that took up more square footage than was reasonable. A couch that only worked in one specific corner. Diana walked in and looked at all of it with the careful attention she probably gave to case files. "You live like a man who stress tests his own furniture," she said. "They're load-bearing bookshelves. They're leaning slightly left. The house leans slightly left." She set her bag down and moved toward the fireplace like it was the only sensible thing in the room. I reheated another portion of soup. We ate on the couch because the dining table had blueprints on it I hadn't since the previous Thursday. For a while we talked about the storm, the outage, the question of whether Hydro Ottawa's website had actually crashed or was simply being honest about its own limitations. Safe things. The kind of conversation that fills space without asking anything of the people in it. Then Diana went quiet. I noticed. She was looking at the record sleeve on the shelf above the piano, an old vinyl of Schubert's Winterreise, the one with the scratched corner I'd found at a garage sale on Bank Street. The kind of record that looked like it had been loved carefully by someone and then let go at a cost. "My fiancé had that record," she said. The fire crackled. I waited. "Had," I said. Not a question, just acknowledging the tense she'd chosen. "He died." She said it cleanly, the way someone says a thing they've said enough times that the shape of it no longer surprises them, but the weight of it still does. 26 months ago, black ice on the 417, he was driving back from his parents' place in Kingston. The room went still in the way rooms do when something real has been said in them. "I'm sorry," I said. She nodded once. "His name was David. He would have hated this storm on principle." A pause. "He hated winter in general. Said it was a collective mistake Canada had never adequately addressed." "He wasn't wrong," I said. "No." Her mouth did something that wasn't quite a smile. "He wasn't. I didn't say he'd want you to be happy, or he'd be proud of how you've managed. I'd had enough of those said to me, when my father died 4 years earlier, to know what they cost the person receiving them." I said, "You moved here after." It wasn't a question. She'd mentioned once, the context of a conversation about the neighborhood association's noise bylaws, that she'd moved from the glebe 2 years back. I'd done the math quietly and never said anything about it. Diana looked at me. "How did you know?" "The way you know a place. You know the shortcut on Riverdale, but you still look up the other routes sometimes. Like you haven't fully decided whether you're staying." She was quiet for a moment. This was supposed to be the place I started over. That was the first completely honest thing she'd said to me in 18 months. I sat with it carefully. "Is it working?" I asked. "Some days." She looked at her mug. "Other days I slide complaint notes under walls because it's easier than talking to people." "I kept them all," I said. She looked up. "The notes?" "All 14, in the drawer by the piano." Her expression shifted, not embarrassment, something softer. "That's slightly alarming," she said. "You called my Chopin technically competent. That's the best review I've ever received." She laughed. One short surprised sound, and the whole room adjusted around it. Hydro Ottawa sent an automated message at 11 saying restoration wasn't expected before the following evening at the earliest. Diana read it on her newly charged phone and looked at me with an expression that acknowledged the situation without conceding anything about it. I showed her the daybed in the office. Clean sheets, a spare blanket. She looked at the folded blanket like it required a comment. "You folded it like a hotel," she said. "I've been alone long enough that my habits have become formal." "Do you have tea?" "I have coffee." "I know you have coffee. I can smell it through the wall every morning." "The tea is from a gift set my aunt sent for Christmas. I haven't opened it." She held out her hand. "I found the gift set in the back of the pantry, still in cellophane." She chose the chamomile. I made myself coffee because sleep had become optional at some point in the last several years, and I'd accepted that. We sat at the kitchen table. She wrapped both hands around her mug. "Tonight is the first bad storm since he died," she said, not dramatically, like she was reporting something. I looked at her. "I've been dreading February for 2 months," she continued, telling myself it would just be a storm, that it wouldn't feel like. She stopped. "It still feels like the same storm." I leaned back, let her have the space of the sentence. She looked up. "This is where most people say time heals." I wasn't going to say that. "What were you going to say?" "Nothing yet. I was listening." She blinked. Then she looked back down. He would have made a terrible joke about the power outage, something about Hydro Ottawa having the project management skills of a first-year apprentice. That's a specific insult. He was an electrician. He had opinions. Fair. Her mouth curved, small reel. "I write the notes," she said then, "because your music is the only sound that comes through the wall." I waited. After David died, the apartment in the Glebe was so quiet I started sleeping with the radio on. Then I moved here, and the wall is thin. I can hear when you're home, when you're playing, when you stop. She traced the rim of her mug. "I write the notes because it's easier than saying, 'Please don't stop. Please keep making the wall make noise.'" I sat very still. "So when I told you your pedaling was off," she said, "I was actually saying." "I know what you were saying," I said. "Tyler." It was the first time she'd said my name without it preceding a sentence that ended in a bylaw citation. It landed differently. "You came over," I said, "because your heat was broken, and because it's the first bad storm in 26 months, and you didn't want to be alone in it. Both of those things can be true at the same time." She stared at me. Then, quietly, "Most people don't know what to do with me when I'm not managing." "I'm not most people. I'm the one who kept 14 complaint notes and fixed his pedaling because you told him to." Her eyes went bright fast enough that she looked away. I walked her to the office around midnight. She stopped in the doorway. "Thank you," she said. No qualifier after it, just the words. "You're welcome." I left the hall light on and my door open. I slept badly, not because anything happened, because nothing did, and nothing had started to feel very loud. Around 3 in the morning, I heard the office door open. I sat up. Diana stood in the hall, one hand on the doorframe, briefly disoriented the way people are when they've forgotten for a merciful second where they are. Then she saw the light, remembered. "I'm fine," she said before I could ask. She stopped. For a second, I forgot it was only a power outage. I didn't say anything clever. Clever felt like the wrong key. She went to the bathroom, came back, paused outside the office. "This is a good wall," she said. I looked at her. From this side, she put her hand flat against the drywall. "I can feel where the piano is, even when you're not playing." A pause. "That probably sounds strange." "It sounds like something you'd have put in a note," I said, "but honestly." She laughed softly, went back to bed. I didn't close my door. In the morning, the ice had stopped falling. Ottawa's version of an apology is clean white sunlight on frozen trees, and the street outside looked like it was trying to make amends. I made oatmeal because it was that kind of morning. Diana came out of the office in yesterday's clothes with a slightly defensive look, as if she expected me to have opinions about the situation. I handed her coffee. She sat at the island. "Hydro's new estimated restoration is tonight," she said, reading her phone. "Maybe. Maybe is their most honest word." She looked at the oatmeal. "You're making breakfast." It's morning, it follows logically. She ate. Then her phone buzzed and her face changed before she'd even picked it up. She read something and set the phone face down on the counter. "David's mum," she said. "To the kitchen, not to me. She does a small dinner on his birthday every year. His family, some close friends. She's asking if I'm coming tonight." I turned down the stove. "Are you?" I asked. I said yes in January when she first asked. She looked at the counter. "I've been looking for a reason to cancel since." "Why?" "Because his mum will hold it together, and his dad won't, and his sister will cry, and they'll all look at me like," she stopped, "like I'm the surviving exhibit. Like you're evidence of what they lost," I said. She looked at me sharply. "Yes. And you'll spend the whole evening managing their grief, so yours stays presentable." Her jaw tightened. I'm good at it. I noticed. I also noticed you slid 14 notes under a wall because you didn't want to have to manage being alone in a room with someone. She picked up her coffee. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she said, "Would you come with me?" The kitchen went quiet. "Not as my neighbor," she said to the counter. "Not as the person who lent me a fireplace. Just," she stopped. "Tried again. As you." David's parents lived in Barhaven, 40 minutes in good conditions. Diana sat in the passenger seat with a bakery box in her lap from the French place on Elgin she'd insisted on stopping for. Lemon tarts, because David had maintained that lemon was the only dessert that tasted like it had a point. He would have been 33, she said, somewhere on Merivale Road. Did he hate birthdays? He pretended to, but he always made a reservation somewhere and told me it was for me. She looked out the window. He was better at receiving than he thought. When we arrived, David's mother, Christine, with the same directness in the way she moved that I later recognized as a thing Diana had absorbed from loving her, opened the door before we knocked. She held Diana for a long time. Then she looked at me with polite confusion. "This is Tyler," Diana said, a pause. "He's my neighbor." Then, half a beat later, "and my friend." That word settled in the hallway, like it meant more than one thing. Inside, the house smelled like roast chicken and the particular warmth of a home that had been preparing for company since morning. David's father, Roger, was quiet in the way of someone carrying a great deal carefully. David's sister, Maura, had come with her husband. 2 friends from David's apprenticeship years were there, and a colleague who'd been close. Everyone was careful with Diana. Gentle the way people are when they've collectively decided gentleness is what the room requires. She hated it. I could see it in the way she answered questions before they finished. The way she smiled a half second too early. The way her hand kept moving to the chain at her collar. I'd noticed the ring the night before, a thin gold band on a delicate chain worn under her shirt. She touched it when the conversation got close to something real. Dinner was not terrible. That almost made it worse. People told stories about David. How he'd rewired an entire apartment for free because the landlord had tried to charge a tenant for a repair that wasn't her fault and he couldn't let it go. How he'd convinced Roger to accept a new winter coat by presenting it as an early Christmas gift. How he'd cried at a beaver segment on a nature documentary and denied it for 6 months. Diana laughed at the right places. Each laugh cost her something. Halfway through Christine's lemon tarts, one of David's friends said, "He'd be so proud of how you've carried yourself, Di. You've been so strong." The table went warm with agreement. Diana's fork came to rest beside her plate. I did not speak. This was not my room to redirect. Diana inhaled once. Then she said, "I haven't been strong." The table quieted. I moved to a different neighborhood and wrote complaint notes to my neighbor about his piano because I needed to have a reason to put words through a wall. She looked at Christine. "I slept with the radio on for 6 months. I turned down cases involving the 417 because I can't look at that highway on a map without." She stopped. "I've been managing. That's different." Her voice shook, but she kept going. "I miss him every day. Not the anniversary version, the Tuesday morning version. The version where you reach for your phone to tell him something, and then remember, and grief has no schedule and no respect for the fact that you have a hearing in 2 hours." Her eyes were wet. "I'm not strong. I'm just still here." Christine stood up and walked around the table and put her arms around Diana from behind. "That's enough," she said quietly. "That's always been enough." Diana cried, the real kind. I sat beside her and didn't try to make it smaller. When her hand found mine under the table, I closed my fingers around hers and stayed still. Nobody rushed the room back to comfortable. For once, everyone let the grief take up its actual amount of space. On the drive home, she was quiet, not empty, settled. We pulled into the Sunnyside driveway, and she didn't get out right away. "Thank you," she said, "for not trying to fix the room. It wasn't mine to fix." "I know, but you were there while I was in it." She looked at her hands. That mattered. The porch light was on. The street was still iced. The sky, the deep February blue Ottawa, does well. Orange light from the street lamps catching the frozen maples. There was no practical reason to keep sitting in the car, and we both knew it. Diana, I said. She looked at me. When the power comes back on, you don't have to go back to being alone just because the emergency is over. She was very still. Is that a housing offer? She said, careful. No. I took a breath. It's the honest thing I should have said before the ice storm gave me an excuse. Her face changed, opened briefly. Then she looked down. Tyler, I don't want you next door because of shared walls, I said. I want you in the room. I kept 14 notes about Chopin and peddling and recycling bins from a woman who was trying to have a conversation through a door because she didn't know how else to have one. I fixed everything you pointed out. I switched to ground coffee. I looked at her. I've been paying attention for a year and a half. I'd like to stop pretending that was purely neighborly. She stared at me. A long moment passed. I will argue when I'm scared, she said. I've noticed. I'll find reasons to go back to my own side, even when I want to stay. I'll leave the hall light on. Something in her face broke open, not sadness, relief. She reached across the console and put her hand over mine. She leaned toward me slowly, and I leaned the rest of the way. The kiss was quiet. It tasted like lemon from Christine's tarts and cold air, and something I didn't have a precise word for. Not a solution to anything, just the first honest answer after a year and a half of notes. When she pulled back, she laughed once, low and unsteady. What? I asked. I'm trying not to say something sarcastic. Take your time. She looked at me in the blue dark, really looked, and said, I wrote the first note because your Chopin woke me up. I wrote the rest because I wanted an excuse to. That was the sentence I took upstairs with me that night. The power came back on at 11:42. Diana texted me, heat restored, no longer a refugee. Your chamomile was expired, by the way. I texted back, I know, you drank it anyway. A pause, then it was fine. That was Diana, I'd take it. She slept in her own house that night, but the next morning she knocked at 8 with a reusable bag from the Glebe Farmers Market and said she was making eggs if I had a pan that wasn't a nonstick tragedy. I had a pan. We ate standing at the kitchen counter because neither of us felt like sitting at a table yet. That was fine too. She moved in officially 11 months later, which she insisted was not official because the word made it sound like a municipal process. She brought her case files and her tote bags and her second cup travel mug and her specific opinions about shelf organization. David's ring moved from the chain to her left hand on the anniversary of his death, a decision she made quietly and told me about after. I listened. I didn't say anything that needed correcting. Her plants colonized the kitchen windowsill. Her voice came through the wall from her old side for the first few weeks while she finished out her lease. And I kept the piano going so she could hear it. On the day she handed back the keys to her side of the duplex, she stood in the shared doorway between our porches for a moment. The same spot she'd stood in the night of the storm. I watched her from mine. I slid notes under this door for a year and a half, she said. 14 notes. 14, she looked at the door, then at me, and this is what it got me. Grammatically aggressive engagement, I said. She smiled, the real one, the one that still caught me off guard when I forgot to expect it. Yeah, she said, something like that. She crossed the porch and came inside. The wall between us has been our wall ever since. Some nights I play too late and she knocks on the doorframe from the hall instead of leaving a note, and I fix whatever needs fixing. She argues when she's scared. I leave the hall light on, and if anyone ever asks us how we got here, she'll probably say, there was an ice storm and my heat went out. I'll say, she said okay too fast and I finally understood why. She'll be right about the facts. I think I'll be right about the rest.